In a landmark decision that is already making waves across the nation and the globe, the Supreme Court has officially struck down the Trump-era tariffs, declaring them an unconstitutional overreach of executive authority and reaffirming the foundational principle of separation of powers. The ruling dismantles these controversial taxes on imported goods, sending a clear and powerful message. The authority to regulate trade and impose tariffs rests with Congress, not the president. This decision reasserts the legislative branch's critical role in shaping the nation's economic policies. American businesses, who spearheaded the legal challenge, argued that the tariffs caused significant financial harm, raising costs for manufacturers and consumers alike, and disrupting supply chains across multiple industries. They also pointed to increased market instability, as the tariffs were imposed by invoking national security laws in ways many saw as a misuse of presidential power, leading to uncertainty in both domestic and international markets. The court's verdict validates the concerns of these businesses, ending years of heated legal and political battles that have divided lawmakers, business leaders, and trade partners. Now, the United States is compelled to reevaluate its trade policy, with lawmakers and economists alike analyzing the long-term impacts of this historic decision. This decision signals a return to a more predictable, rules-based system for international commerce, giving businesses and trading partners greater confidence in the stability of U.S. trade policy. By restoring checks and balances in trade policy, the Supreme Court has reinforced the importance of constitutional limits on executive power. Industries ranging from agriculture to manufacturing are expected to benefit from the removal of these tariffs, as lower costs and improved access to global markets could boost production and job growth. Additionally, retaliatory tariffs imposed by other countries are now likely to be lifted, opening new opportunities for American exporters and strengthening international relationships. As the nation watches closely, the President and Congress must now work together to navigate this new post-tariff landscape, shaping the future of American trade in a rapidly changing world. The Trump-era tariffs were introduced as a bold move to protect American industries and, as officials claimed, to safeguard national security. The administration argued that decades of globalization and shifting supply chains had left key sectors, like steel and aluminum, vulnerable to foreign competition and even potential threats. By imposing tariffs, the government hoped to revitalize domestic manufacturing, ensuring that the United States would not be dependent on other countries for materials critical to its infrastructure and defense. The tariffs specifically targeted what the administration described as years of unfair trade practices, with a particular focus on China. Officials pointed to issues like forced technology transfers, intellectual property theft, and massive trade imbalances as reasons for taking action. Using decades-old trade laws, the White House imposed heavy taxes on steel, aluminum, and a wide range of other imports, aiming to level the playing field for American producers and send a message to trading partners around the world. Supporters of the tariffs saw them as a necessary step to bring jobs back to American soil, strengthen local industries, and force other countries to negotiate on long-standing issues like intellectual property theft and market access. They believed these measures would ultimately benefit American workers and restore the country's economic strength. However, critics argued that the tariffs ended up hurting American consumers and businesses more than foreign competitors. They pointed out that higher import costs led to increased prices for everyday goods, squeezed small businesses, and triggered retaliatory tariffs from other countries that damaged U.S. exports, especially in agriculture and manufacturing. The policy quickly became a flashpoint in American politics, dividing the nation. On one side were protectionists who believed in defending American jobs at all costs. On the other, free trade advocates who warned of economic isolation and strained relationships with key allies. The resulting economic disruption and diplomatic friction set the stage for a powerful legal challenge, as businesses struggled to adapt to the new reality. With little relief coming from the political process, many businesses, large and small, turned to the courts, hoping for a legal remedy to the sweeping tariffs. That legal fight would not only test the limits of presidential power over trade, but also reshape the future of American trade policy for years to come. The legal battle began with Universal Forest Products versus United States, as importers and manufacturers argued the president exceeded authority under trade law. Lower courts were reluctant to intervene, deferring to the executive on national security, but the plaintiffs persisted, and a 2024 appeals court decision found the administration had ignored statutory deadlines, setting up a Supreme Court showdown. The business's legal strategy focused on statutory limits, not presidential power itself, framing the case as one of law, not politics. This approach resonated with the judiciary, leading the Supreme Court to take up the case. The outcome would define the separation of powers in the era of global commerce. At the Supreme Court, the government argued the president needs broad flexibility in trade disputes, especially for national security. They warned that limiting executive power would weaken America's ability to respond to global threats. The business coalition countered that the president must follow the law and cannot bypass Congress's explicit limits. They detailed how the administration missed deadlines and expanded tariffs beyond what Congress allowed. Justices pressed the government on where presidential authority ends, revealing skepticism about unchecked executive power. The business's argument was clear. Congress writes the laws, and the president must execute them as written. This text-based approach resonated with the court. The stage was set for a historic decision. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously, 9-0, to strike down the tariffs, delivering a forceful rebuke to executive overreach. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that while the president has significant authority in foreign affairs, it must be exercised within boundaries set by Congress. The court found the administration had exceeded its authority by imposing tariffs after statutory deadlines had passed. The decision focused on legal process, not economic wisdom, and sent shockwaves through Washington. Businesses that challenged the tariffs are now eligible for billions in refunds, injecting capital back into the economy. The ruling's unanimity underscores the importance of protecting Congress's constitutional role. This precedent will be difficult for future administrations to challenge. Washington must now adapt to a new balance of power. This landmark decision represents a significant check on presidential power, particularly in the realms of trade and national security. For years, the executive branch has enjoyed broad discretion to act swiftly, often bypassing the slower legislative process. Now, the Supreme Court has drawn a clear line, signaling that the president's authority is not without limits. For decades, presidents have steadily expanded their ability to act unilaterally, especially when it comes to imposing tariffs or adjusting trade policy. This ruling pushes back against that trend, reaffirming the foundational principle that only Congress has the constitutional power to create new taxing authority. The decision reasserts the importance of separation of powers, reminding both the executive and legislative branches of their distinct roles. Going forward, future presidents will no longer be able to impose sweeping tariffs or make major changes to trade policy without explicit approval from Congress. This means that executive orders alone are no longer sufficient for such significant economic actions, and the president must work more closely with lawmakers to achieve these goals. As a result, administrations will be compelled to rely more heavily on diplomacy, negotiation, and consensus building, both at home and abroad. The days of unilateral action are giving way to a renewed emphasis on collaboration and shared decision-making. For businesses and international partners, this ruling brings a new sense of stability and predictability to U.S. trade policy. The uncertainty that once frustrated companies and allies, who worried that rules could change overnight, will be greatly reduced, allowing for better long-term planning and investment. With these new guardrails in place, America's allies may now be more willing to enter into long-term agreements, confident that the rules of engagement are less likely to shift suddenly with a change in administration. Some critics argue that this decision could weaken the president's leverage in tough negotiations, making it harder to respond quickly to global challenges. However, supporters say it restores the constitutional system of checks and balances, ensuring that no single branch can act without oversight. The challenge ahead will be finding the right balance, protecting national interests and security while respecting the boundaries and responsibilities clarified by the court. Both branches must now adapt to this new reality. In the end, the presidency has been reined in, and Congress's vital role in shaping the nation's economic future is restored, marking a new chapter in the ongoing evolution of American governance. The Supreme Court's ruling is a call to action for Congress to reclaim its constitutional authority over trade. Lawmakers must now decide whether to replace the old tariff regime or pursue new trade policies through open debate. This shift moves trade policy from the White House back to Congress, empowering committees and individual lawmakers. Lobbyists and stakeholders will now focus on Capitol Hill, making the process more transparent and participatory. The long-term impact depends on whether Congress can overcome gridlock and craft a durable, balanced trade policy. The legal path is clear. It's up to Congress to lead. For American businesses, the end of the tariffs brings immediate relief. Lower costs, more predictable supply chains, and renewed access to global markets. Manufacturers and retailers can now plan investments in hiring with greater confidence. Exporters, especially farmers, expect foreign markets to reopen as retaliatory tariffs are lifted. Rural economies hit hardest by the trade war may see a much-needed boost. Trade economist Dr. Evelyn Reed calls this a game changer for American competitiveness, predicting a wave of investment and renewed global partnerships. The consensus, while the tariffs aim to protect, they ultimately hurt U.S. producers and consumers. The court's decision paves the way for a more stable, prosperous economic future. American business is ready to move forward. The Supreme Court's decision ends a tumultuous era of trade wars and sets the U.S. on a new course. By reaffirming Congress's central role, the ruling restores the rule of law and opens the door to more stable, collaborative trade policy. Congress must now forge a new consensus, and the White House must adapt to a world where negotiation trumps unilateral action. Businesses face the challenge of rebuilding supply chains and relationships. The world is watching to see if America can lead with stability and engagement. The next chapter in U.S. trade policy is unwritten. Congress and the American people now hold the pen. The future of American trade begins today.